Hey there, welcome. Lotus, Art of Sacred Embodiment. Today we are talking once again about relational intimacy and how we can learn from the twin flame or twin soul model and apply it to all of our higher love relationships. One of the things that I want to say before we dive into this conversation has to do with it's important to begin to remember that these are templates that are coming into our consciousness that ask us to step up into higher levels of ourselves. So they tend to carry more energetic codes and frequencies of idealism, right? And and what I want to say is that this is a process. When I'm talking and sharing about all of this, there isn't a perfected state that we are needing to reach. This is a consistent upgrading of our consciousness and our ability to love. Different expressions of love that we are learning about that take us beyond just the personal attached love. And when we're talking about healing as well, we do evolve out of healing. And my guru used to talk about it in the way of we have the phases and stages where we go to our therapists and our psychologists or psychiatrists, right? Because we need psychological stabilizing and integration of healthy perspectives of the self and the egoic construct. That is the stage of healing. Once we have accessed our own balance and stepping into more of operating from wholeness, we then move into our spiritual evolution, we could say, our spiritual psychology, which is very different than the earlier stages of our healing. The spiritual psychology, we'll just say, that is where we begin stepping into much higher levels of maturation. And I haven't talked about it for a while, but we start coming into those higher registers of our emotional IQ, spiritual IQ, somatic and embodied IQ, and our relational IQ. This is where we have already moved through the karmic stages of relationship. We're moving into conscious relating, deeper levels of intimacy, and then these templates of our spiritual maturation for the masculine and feminine begin to trickle down, right? And we all are going to have our own trajectory. We all are going to have our unique configurations. And even though it sounds like there may be tall orders or, oh my gosh, I can't be with my person until I've reached these idyllic states. That isn't necessarily the case. However, the intention is to keep the eye on the ball, and the ball has everything to do with our personal spiritual evolution and maturation, so that no matter what we're engaging in, that is the focus. And then as we come into higher levels of relational intimacy, then what happens is that becomes a container for those next levels of growth. So when we're talking about the twin flame model, the twin flame templates are leading the way, right? The twin flame templates are the forerunners of the new relationship paradigm. They are outlining the blueprints and giving us a mapping system to gauge our growth and our trajectory and our intentionality and the visioning of where we're going. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, because I think it can sound sort of out of reach, and that isn't necessarily my intention. Or if you aren't hitting, certain rungs of the ladder, then you're missing the mark, or we're not quite getting it. That's not what I want to be conveying. But I also am not clarifying this every time, or I try to do that when I go through the stages, but because it takes that takes like 5 minutes right, to clarify all of this all the time. So this is a little bit of that disclaimer, and if you're following me regularly, then or these specific videos, then I'm talking to you, and I just want to affirm and confirm that you're right where you need to be, and we're all on this journey in our right place, and there is a vision that we're moving towards. So if all of this resonates with you, thanks for being here and for subscribing if it feels appropriate. And you can also join me over on Patreon for more ascension information in general. This right now is more relational intimacy and the new paradigms of higher love coming in and divine union. All right, let's dive in then. So what I wanted to talk about today does have to do with another example of the twin flame modeling. And when I'm talking about the twin flames from my perspective, I am not talking about the early phases and stages, the externalized phases and stages of running and chasing still. And I am not also talking about the deeper levels of wounding that still need to be addressed in the very early stages of our healing, that are more focused on destructive relationships or the destructive patterns of our wounding and seeking love. So that's not really what I talk about here. I'm talking about conscious relationships, or just on that cusp. So the twin flame relationship, when it is governed by the divine, and when we're aligning with the divine guidance, it happens multidimensionally first. This is the inner union of we work on ourselves, we marry, we alchemize our own elements and our inner masculine and feminine to come into that inner union and inner marriage. Now, whether we are aware of it or not, depending on your blueprint and what is appropriate for you and what codes you carry, you may or may not be aware that there is also, I go up here, it's not literally up there, but it's more in here. But a lot of this journey, particularly through the first years, after activation, after, let's say, the second activation, then it's taking place in the higher realms, where the twins, the souls, are unifying in higher dimensions. And so as that process happens, eventually it starts working its way down to the physical, into the 3D realm. This is what is starting to land more and more to recalibrate what love is on our planet and what the divine relationship is and was meant to be in our divine expressions of the divine masculine and divine feminine. As this process becomes maybe more in the awareness of one or both of the counterparts, that running and chasing is no longer happening in the physical. And what this starts to do is it allows time and space to take place. In this time and space, this is where we're doing our individual healing, right? We're coming into self-love, we're coming into deeper awareness and understanding, and we're recognizing that I have my own patterns and responsibilities that I need to own, that have been a part of the original wounding, distorted connection. And these patterns tend to be all of the, very common collective woundings that humanity carries, particularly in developed countries, of abandonment, rejection, lack of self-worth, feeling, I talked about that loneliness program, right? Trying to fill our own sense of self and our lack of self-love, and feeling loved from another person. So what ends up happening, right, if you're in the physical playing out the runner and chaser dynamic, then the triggers are constantly being triggered and the focus can be on the other person way too much, right? And there's I'm trying to communicate and my person won't, so I'm being rejected, and the person who's not communicated is, I'm being, accosted and they're trying to take my energy, whatever these dynamics are, right? Don't feel safe, don't feel loved. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be pressured. Kind of all of these things, they're happening and ricocheting. And those aren't really the issues, right? The issues aren't the other person. The issue is ourselves. And why are we in the dynamic to begin with, right? Why are these my triggers to begin with? That's the karmic level. Conscious relationship, we're kind of trying to figure those out for ourselves, and that's a longer journey, but it's a healing journey, it's a stabilizing journey. We're moving from growing into a wholeness psychology, so to speak, and into our spiritual maturation. Now, what the twin flames teach us is that there's a whole other level of who we are. And when we are working together, whether we know it or not, in tandem energetically, as governed and guided by the divine, by God, by life, by our guides, by our highest selves, we have time and space in order to recognize what every storyline that we carry holds for us. And there is a magical way that, because these counterparts are always connected, there's still a dance happening in the ethereal realms. They're still coming together, hearts opened, feeling really connected, feeling the truth, feeling that signature that I've talked about. And then higher life, our own inner world, will trigger. There will be this communication, right, kind of telepathically, that forces us to look at yet another level. So when we're doing all of this work, we have time to reflect and to deeply understand our karmic makeup. And why is this important, right? Because we're moving from karmically operating beings into divine humans. All of that needs to be healed. All of that needs to be integrated and neutralized and clarified and purified. And again, we're not looking for perfection. We don't know how long all of this takes and how many layers that we get to move through. But we get to look at, what are my patterns that need healing? What are my emotional patterns? What are my mental thought patterns? What are my, what level of embodiment do I have of my integrated whole self? We get to take accountability and ownership for our own feelings, our own experience, our own division from our own self of love and honor and self-respect and empowerment. We get then to sensitize, right? Because over time, at whatever point, the counterparts in the twin model begin to sensitize energetically to their counterpart. And sometimes it's felt as, this is me. Sometimes we can feel it as the other. And this happens in a myriad of different ways that don't need to necessarily go into right here. But it's recognizing and sensitizing to more of our essence. Okay? So we're expanding ourselves from our physicality into our divine essence. This happens because the twins are doing divine work on themselves, for the other, for the unit as a whole, in a way that we cannot access at this point with the tools and skills that we have on the 3D plane. Okay? So as this happens, it is the distance that sensitizes us. And it is the distance and the not being in contact where we begin to discern deeper and deeper our own energetics and our own beliefs and our own karmic patterns that don't even come from this time, right? This lifetime. And in the meantime, we get to be coming more deeply connected to our own soul presence and divine source and our own divinity. Our highest selves are divine aspects of us. They are in this mix. They are guiding us. They are supporting us. They are informing us. So from this twin flame perspective, our counterparts, our divine counterpart, our signature frequency match, right? Our true essencing that is experienced in ourselves and is a part of the whole, carries all of the information of our divinity. And so we are always in contact. Our highest selves, right? Because it's one soul. My highest selves are always in contact with my counterparts' highest selves. You know, they're communicating up there. They're sort of like calling some of these shots, right? In alignment with the greater source intelligence. And they're recognizing and assessing where the counterparts are and what they need for their next level of coming into wholeness. And they're going to determine, like the larger they of our divinity, this is just my sense in the communication that I get, they're going to determine when the twin counterparts come into union and how much they have to learn before they can come into the physical realm. So again, the counterparts don't have to be in perfection, but they have to have enough awareness of what doesn't work and who they are and how the dynamics have healed in the perfect way for both people. Right? So one counterpart, when we're in this in a divinely aligned way, not through self-will trying to like meet our counterpart or, you know, run into our counterpart or force communication with our counterpart. That's our self-will. It's not going to work, right? It's not supposed to work. Like it would be disastrous if that worked. And so, or that would be stunting in this growth. But at this point in time on our planet, my sense is there are very few that carry the true blueprint, that are forerunners for this movement, right? This jump in evolution. We're tuned in to the divine, to life, to a bigger presence, whatever that is. And so when these two come in, they're both going to still have their, let's say, their blind spots, right? Or those areas where they each need to develop more. And if they land in the physical, then they're going to be the perfect companions to support the other in whatever balancing needs to be done, because it can be done in this realm. It no longer has to be done in the subtle realms. So I hope that's making sense. So the twin flame model, the template, the blueprint, is here to show us a new way of operating. So let me just sort of sum this up a little bit with how does this apply to those of you who are seeking and called to sacred union, but you may or may not have that template. You may have it and you may not know it yet. You just know that you're really called to this relational intimacy of higher love, and you do carry the template, or it's still written in your blueprint that you're one of the people that this is what is your path, right? Of whatever that means for you. You just know, right? So how we look at this is the twin flame model lets us know everything that takes place, I have to take accountability for in myself. I have the empowerment within me to be responsible for all of my actions, all of my emotional fragmentation of my karmic personality, all of the thought forms that have been distorted or accurate, all of the boundaries that need to be created or released, and any levels of protection that are still held, that are just a reflection that I have to learn to love myself more, and that I don't have to be afraid of love or rejection. Okay? So, and then we attune through our own self-love, through the love of the divine, through the love of our inner masculine and feminine, which is our divine masculine and feminine, which is, at some level, our counterpart within us, and our divine aspects within them, right? So this is and I did that video on we have to believe to be able to perceive. I think it's the video right before this. This is a magical path, and it requires at least the willingness to believe. And I can say for myself, I had so much resistance to this. I didn't understand. I didn't understand because I didn't know about it. I didn't know how it worked until I had to go through the initiations and every level of coming out of, the short period of my own runner chaser dynamic, which was primarily within me. Once I realized what the higher, template was that I was running, I was like, wow, okay, everything is making so much sense now. And then I had to surrender to the divine. I had to surrender to the initiations from my team and from my highest selves. So if you're actually carrying these templates, it is a process of surrender. And what we learn over time is we come into these higher states of our own union, and it changes everything. And this is what we're all able to begin doing this work, held and supported by the higher realms. And it's beautiful, it's magical, it has its developmental phases and stages and ways of shifting consciousness. It is a path of awakening, right? It is a path of ascension. It is part of ascension because it is a facet of divine union. And it is the revolution. It is the inner and spiritual revolution to completely overhaul romantic relationships and the healed masculine and feminine tear. So I think I'm going to just stop with that. And of course, as always, if you're looking to explore this path, then you can check out the links below. And yeah, so where are you, right? If you're watching these videos, hopefully they're helping you in whatever relationship you're already in. And there's always deepening, right? So, I would love to support you on that journey. All right, blessings.